A waitress that can sing and a record label president swap bodies after an encounter with a Christmas spell. Forced to live their lives as each other, they approach troubles within their own work and families. But the question is, will they be able to overcome challenges not really meant for them? Hello, and welcome to our channel. Today we'll recap and review a 2018 Christmas movie called A Christmas Switch. Let's check it out.
On stage is a fairly beautiful woman with an exceptional voice, singing a carol for the holidays in front of a large crowd. The origins of this woman begin a year prior, inside a diner where she performs in front of a small yet appreciative audience. Though highly talented and hard-working, Audrey, married and a mother to a 4-year-old, drives herself to the ground with her menial job despite possessing the qualities desired for a music label, as pointed out by one of her customers, a certain Julia. Julia, orderly yet assertive, is inside the diner seeking singers to salvage her record label in danger of being overrun by major competition. Recognizing Audrey's excellent voice, singing her own solo after being forced to duo with someone below her skill set. Before hurriedly leaving the diner, the record manager curiously asks the waitress why she's living a life that undermines her capabilities. And she's met with clumsiness and a rather simple yet endearing response, her motherhood, which she relates to. Both of their lives fit themselves, but both also parallel with wanting what each other has. Julia desires Audrey's humble background, viewing the waitress from inside the diner with her husband and child. And Audrey herself is more or less jealous of her customer's extravagant lifestyle.
The holidays grow closer, and their fates become even more entwined when one night they unknowingly shop inside the same Christmas store, where destiny awaits for the season that will ultimately change their lives.
Surrounded with all sorts of decorations while the two browse for presents, unaware of each other's presence, the store owner, Mrs. Nick, has a mysterious purpose set for the two. Much to the cluelessness of both women when she expresses the knowledge of their names. As they browse further, fate leads both under a Christmas tree, where both tug against each other for a candy cane ornament attached to it. Sudden snow falls as the two argue until the ornament splits in two. Then a bright flash of light erupts and the two are blown away from each other from the blast. The next morning is unlike any other for either, with events that parallel the two as they both wake up from supposed head injuries inside bedrooms they don't recognize and show animosity towards the men accompanying them, though the very same men are actually their husbands respectively. Confused and terrified, both take looks at themselves in the mirrors, and what they see are not themselves, but each other. Audrey is inside Julia's body, while Julia is within hers.
To prevent any further confusion as the story progresses, every time either of them is mentioned, Julia will be referred to as Audrey and Audrey is to Julia. You get it, right? With said confusion in mind, Julia figures that since she's posing as Audrey, going to the diner is the most reasonable option, considering that's where she, in her body, would most likely be.
Encountering the diner's manager, the man approaches her to make her get back to work, as Julia as Audrey apparently called in sick after the events that transpired. With her presence inside the diner, she should be more than able to perform her duties to her customers. Instead, Audrey herself arrives at the scene, and they can't help but be appalled with what they're seeing. It's as if the mirrors they saw themselves in earlier are once more in front, but in the flesh. Their idea of reversing the current dilemma is to trace their steps back to where it all happened, the Christmas store. However, their search for a solution to their problem ends up in futility as the ornament they broke the previous night couldn't be found anywhere. Having only 2 weeks before Christmas to find a way to restore themselves, without any other choice, they agree to live their lives as each other, given that there are no other reasonable options. Exchanging tips and useful information on how to deal with the difficulties in their corresponding work and families, both go their separate ways, seemingly unable to change their minds about it. Yet another December morning rolls in as the days inch closer to Yuletide, with both trying to make out what to do with the selves that aren't theirs. Audrey, despite being granted wealth and luxury, begins to regret it later on, being confronted with Julia's managerial tasks of maintaining a record label on the verge of going under. Posing as a person known for authority and order, the sudden change in demeanor confuses her assistant, who is coerced by Audrey to attend a partnership meeting the person she's posing as asked for in her stead, proving herself to be ill-equipped towards organization, which is apparent in her past life. Meanwhile, as unused as Julia is to the homemaking lifestyle a mother usually does, picking up Audrey's daughter, Kelly, from her kindergarten seems more tedious than her usual systemic habits. Condescending and sassy as one would expect from her, however, meeting and establishing a connection with the child manages to change her expression, while still maintaining her confidence in part of her workaholic personality, and bonding with the little kid at the kindergarten cements her comfort with handling young children. But as children grow older, dealing with them becomes a totally different issue. Returning to the Sampsons' house, Audrey's exhaustion is met with Julia's teenage daughter, Laurel, academically inclined yet indifferent towards her. Familiar with her mother's daily routine, she recognizes certain distinctions with her actions and displays a cold and distant character towards her own mother. Even so, Audrey isn't her mother, but nonetheless a mother herself, and shows valid concern regarding the relationship of the daughter of the person she switched places with, inclining to warm Julia up with her child. While Audrey deals with the structuring required back at the studio, Julia is agitated by the lack of it with the Turners. Kelly can't receive the needed time to learn to read, the diner demands way too much of her energy, and Audrey's can-do attitude is made worse by its inefficiencies and unnecessities. Doing what she does best, Julia can't help but rewire and restructure Audrey's relationships and work management, though in turn readily accosting the intimacies of Audrey's husband by rejecting it every chance he gets. At work, Audrey is heavily struggling with the pressure and amount of effort that she can only manage with assistance from Julia, completely underestimating her industry. She also tells her concerns about Laurel, which are discarded without further thought by the rightful mother of the girl. Being more family-oriented, she's willing to tread the distance between Julia and Laurel, because technically she's her responsibility too. Gathering up shelf decorations and furnishing the Sampson household, she invites the teenager to set up with her, much to the surprise of the girl and Julia's husband. What they see as a sudden change of heart with who they perceive as mother and wife consecutively is nothing more than Audrey being herself.
Their act continues day by day, but Julia is eventually forced to confront Audrey's responsibilities as a service worker back at the diner. Serving orders incorrectly is one thing, but singing badly is another thing altogether. Witnessed by Audrey herself, seeing now her already underappreciated reputation being further diminished by her friend's incapabilities of customer service, well, I mean, let's be honest, she's doing pretty much the exact same thing back at the studio, but both yield by suggesting that they take it easier than they should and relax from all the incapacitating work that they've been doing.
This takes a turn for the worse for the studio, though, when Audrey becomes way more relaxed than she should be, refusing to meet with the talents the studio should be hiring to save themselves from being purchased. Her productivity goes elsewhere, too busy repairing the Sampsons family's well-being, thus forcing the actual Julia to take matters into her own hands by going directly to her own home, undoubtedly facing the consequences of her actions. For some reason, however, Mrs. Nick is at the gates of her community as yet another ploy of her intricate yet secretive plan, and lets Julia inside the subdivision to save her career from the hands of a family woman. Staring from outside her own home, she sees Audrey, ignoring the urgentness of her work, who's instead bonding with her family in a game of charades. Audrey has a heart-to-heart with Laurel, who's genuinely enjoying what she sees as her mother's out-of-place change in personality, yet in place enough for her to adore these holidays as their best. In a twist of fate, Audrey charades as a better Julia than she herself can, because seeing her daughter happy is something she couldn't do by herself. Suddenly, her looming presence is noticed, prompting the Sampsons in a fleeting panic, only to be let in by Audrey, much to their bewilderment. So-called reunion aside, duty calls for Audrey, for she is to meet a contractual celebrity considering signing with the studio immediately to bind an agreement between the label and the signatory, a famous talent going by Gavin Vaughn, who's been sought after by Julia since the beginning of her company's challenges. His signature is Julia's Hail Mary before being stomped down by opposing musical behemoths, and it's under the Waitress' questionable responsibility to pull something of this magnitude off, With assistance via remote communication, Julia lectures Audrey on all the things that are needed to be said and done for the transaction, but poor execution renders this method ineffective. Gavin signed up for more, but the studio only provides a quarter less of the amount he demands, immediately discarding the offer in favor of those willing to meet what he wants. On the way of making his leave, Audrey begins to engage with him not as the president of a media label company, but sincerely as an unrecognized talent herself. She implores the celebrity of how his fame is enough to let people have what they want of him, that he stands up for the talents that can't, and that the value of their deal isn't financial, but an actual bond between people whose respect is in place of the price tag the label lacks. Gavin sees the spark in Audrey's eyes, convincing him to finally take the deal. Much to Julia's joy of having her company saved by the likes of someone she deemed too risky for it, the two then plan on meeting up with their families on the off chance that doing so would finally revert the initial states of their bodies. This didn't just mean their sought-after return to their lives, but also as a way to reconnect with their respective families together after having been identifiably severed from them short of 2 weeks' time. The Turners and the Sampsons join each other for a gathering at the latter's home, where they celebrate in the spirit of the season, much to their enjoyment but one. Laurel's academia disrupts her celebration of the gathering, and in turn, her mood. Julia follows her to where she wallows, and through confession, without the presence of the imposter posing as her mother, the young girl reveals that her reasoning for maintaining a streak of aces is to not disappoint the mother she cold-heartedly apprehends, only because she desires her approval while being able to stand up against the standards held for her. Julia, being Audrey, begins to mimic the person she possesses, and tells her actual daughter that her mother wouldn't be disappointed even if her performances don't reach her expectations. Her happiness is what matters more, and she's loved no matter what. If only her mother had enough time to give and show it.
For once in her life, Julia is appreciated by her own flesh and blood. But for her, it probably feels a bit incomplete, as the entire credit of her daughter's love and appreciation goes towards Audrey, who's also incapable of fully expressing her own love towards her own child.
They can't help but long to return to their bodies immediately, as time is also running out for them. Their families are together, but they are nowhere near to who they actually are, and can't help but wish for their bodies back by actually wishing for it. Wishful thinking won't work on its own, but with a little bit of magic, it might. On the clock and in a hurry, they rush for the Christmas market just a few minutes before it closes for another year. Huddled underneath the same Christmas tree, they find the very same candy cane ornament, this time conjoined the same as before their switches. The essence of this entire endeavor is to bring back things to where they belong. They just want to be themselves again. Once more, pulling it apart, the same exact events from before occur, but on this occasion, the lights attached to the tree emanate a seasonal glow, signifying a change distinct from the initial one. Come Christmas morning, after spending weeks leading up to it as different people, they came out even more different, but now switched back as themselves after a long time disassociated from their loved ones. An entire year passes for yet another joyful holiday season, as Audrey performs a seasonal melody over an audience that can finally recognize her vocal aptitude. After the imminent success of Julia's record label that followed, the two families have shown a much closer bond with themselves and each other, after a mystifying couple of weeks significantly changed the trajectory of their entire lives. Although unrecognized by them until realizing it too late, Mrs. Nick herself attended backstage production just to subtly let the media partners know that the triumphs in both their careers and the restoration of their familial relationships have been her intent all along. To let them appreciate what they have, that they can give a part of themselves to one another and see what they don't see in themselves. Though she took this rather literally with Audrey and Julia. Not only has she changed their minds about themselves, she's also changed their hearts. However, her presence also implies that something similar might happen again. And it may already have.
As a Christmas flick, this one really sticks with the classic holiday themes of family, love, and compassion, but with a little bit of a twist, where the protagonists are forced to wear each other's shoes in a very literal sense. It's simple and great for people, especially young children, to learn that whenever 'tis the season or otherwise, they should appreciate themselves with what they have. And even if you see that others have it better, they also have their own struggles to overcome. Please leave a like and subscribe if you want to be notified of our next upload. And don't forget to suggest new movies for us to recap in the future in the comments below.